We wanted to create a fund where Black founders specifically could come and pitch and know that they would be judged on their merit, not on their race. That was the first thing. The second thing was we wanted to dedicate a pool of capital to Black founders to ensure we were making a dent in the disparities related to capital allocation, right? So, 55 million is not that much money, but it's 55 million more that we absolutely know is going to Black founders in healthcare than we had before.
And now, from San Francisco and the UCSF Rosenman Institute, the Health Technology Podcast with your host, Christine Winoto.
One of the subjects we keep coming back to here on the Health Technology Podcast is healthcare inequities. COVID-19 revealed a lot of very stark racial inequities in our systems. And a lot of our podcast guests are out there doing the incredibly difficult work addressing these disparities. Our podcast guest today, Marcus Whitney, is one of them. Marcus created Jumpstart Nova in 2020 to fund historically underfunded Black startups. He was also a founding partner of Jumpstart Health Investors, CEO of Health Further Conference, and co-founder of Trillion Health. All that and the best-selling author of Create and Orchestrate. Today, we discuss how to navigate the industry and what lessons you can take from his amazing career. Here's our conversation. Well, thanks, Marcus, for joining me this afternoon.
Thank you, Christine. I'm so happy to be here.
And I'm so excited to have our conversation today. I think you're the first guest that I know who are joining us from Nashville.
Oh, that's an honor. There's certainly a lot of healthcare and entrepreneurship happening here in Nashville, so I'm glad I get to be the first, hopefully of many.
Yeah, I never asked, but somehow I felt like you're the first one from Nashville that we know. I mean, obviously, Nashville is such a city that everybody's always associated with music, and I think it's always fun. And I know you're pretty involved in that music scene as well. But before we dive in a lot of the things that we want to talk about, it will be helpful for us to understand about your background, what your journey path, like your personal background that takes you to where you are today.
Sure. Yeah. So maybe just start with a quick rundown of what I'm doing today. So I'm a healthcare venture capitalist. And focus on early stage investing. So for those familiar with the names of the stages, pre-seed, seed, and Series A investing, check sizes anywhere from 150K to probably, 5 million are what we do. The name of our firm is Jumpstart Health Investors, and we have several different funds that we manage on the Jumpstart Health Investors platform, what we call it. And I've been doing this for 8 years. So that's kind of, where I am today. And that's my day job. Going all the way back, I was born and raised in Brooklyn, New York in 1975. Both of my parents stayed together and are still alive, thankfully. And, I had a great life growing up in Brooklyn, New York. Very, very diverse, part of the city. Lots of great families, and had a great time in school, lots of cool friends. Was fortunate that my uncle was a programmer at IBM. He lived in upstate New York, but he was a programmer at IBM. And he, for like my 8th or 9th year Christmas, gave me an IBM PC Junior. So that was my first computer. And from there, I learned, programming, because computers back then didn't do anything that you didn't make them do through programming. So there was no Windows, there was no mouse, it was just the keyboard and the monitor, and it like the screen looked like the Matrix, like black screen, green letters, kind of thing. And so that was very fortunate for me, because as I matriculated through high school, ended up going to college for architecture, went to school to UVA for architecture. I basically shifted away from that major and dropped out to be a musician, to be a hip hop producer and also artist. And did that for like 3-4 years, and had a lot of fun going up and down the East Coast, and ultimately landed in Atlanta, where I ended up meeting a girl, starting a family, and then had to reevaluate the whole music thing because, it's the odds of getting a record deal in music are really, really tough. And once we had one kid and then she was pregnant with the second one, it was like, I need to really reevaluate this whole music plan thing. So we ended up moving to Nashville because she spent her high school years in Nashville, had a best friend here, and that was a little bit of a smaller, slower town, so we could start to build some community around us. When I got here, I was waiting tables 6.5 days a week at two different restaurants, and living in a week-to-week efficiency hotel. I was sort of 24 at the time, and really just trying to figure out what I was going to do. How was I going to, transition out of this situation? And this was Labor Day of 2000 was when I moved to Nashville, and so that was the .com boom. And at that time, there were all these things, not so much on the internet because, we didn't have a ton of broadband at the time. It was still, pretty slow connections. But on TV, there were lots of stories of high school kids who had dropped out of high school and they were programming for companies making six figures, riding around in offices on skateboards, right? And so I took that as a signal to me that if these kids can drop out of high school, then, certainly if I teach myself how to do this web programming, I can become viable and I can get a job. So I spent 8 months in between waiting tables, teaching myself how to code, going to what are called user group meetings in the programming world, where professional programmers come together and just kind of geek out and nerd out about certain technologies. And I didn't geek out and nerd out about them. I was just there to learn and watch and see how professional programmers behave and how they show up in the world. And over the course of 8 months of doing that, I applied to a bunch of different companies and eventually got my first programming job at a company called HealthStream as a junior content developer, programming continuing education courseware that was like on a CD-ROM installable, onto the computers. It's like completely different world from where we are today, right? Like there were no websites where you could like learn online. It was all like these CD-ROMs and stuff. So that was like the transition for me into the professional world. I spent the next 7 years elevating as a technologist from a junior programmer ultimately to a chief technology officer and chief architect, and also moved from healthcare into digital marketing. So ended up being the head of technology at a email marketing company from 2003 2007 that ended up doing very well, and I earned some equity. So that was where I started really learning about startups and equity and how do you build companies and go from burning cash to making cash and sort of all that stuff. And then in 2007, the company was doing well, but also started to get a little big, a little political, for me anyway. And I decided this was probably the right opportunity for me to shift into entrepreneurship. So I left in 2007. I went to South by Southwest in 2007, and that was a really important year for that festival. Twitter kind of launched there. Zuckerberg was there. Gary Vaynerchuk was there. It was kind of the beginning of the whole social web. Kind of happened at that event. And so that was where I realized, oh man, the world is changing. And then also in 2007, the iPhone came out. And so I was sort of right on the front end of that. And what I ultimately decided was I wanted to learn more about venture capital. That was like the big takeaway for me coming out of South by Southwest was in Nashville, there was not a lot of venture capital. And so I just was not that aware of it. The email marketing company that I was at, Emma, was not venture capital backed. The two founders, they invested in the company by mortgaging their house. And so taking loans out from the bank. And so when I went to South by, I was like, oh, wow, there's people who are writing checks into these companies and they're really advancing innovation in a really crazy way. So I started the process of learning what venture capital was, how it worked, and how might I get to that side of the table? How might I get to the check writing side of the table? I met a venture capitalist here in Nashville, a guy named Vic Gatto, and we started to exchange information. I was teaching him about the new era of entrepreneurship and technology, like Steve Blank and the lean startup and open source software and the cloud. I was teaching him about all that stuff. And he was teaching me about finance and venture capital. And eventually we decided to become partners. And that started what today is Jumpstart Health Investors. A portfolio of 150 companies and 3 funds, 10 fund vintages, and what's been really great. So I guess the main throughput there has been technology and innovation has been key for me throughout my career, from the very beginning of like getting out of being a waiter, especially once I had 2 kids, and getting into programming, which was the definitive change in my life. But then ultimately, the more and more I leaned into technology, the more and more I learned about the broader world around technology, and then learned about venture capital, and now am a venture capitalist, which is pretty crazy.
Yeah, and I think it's when you look back many, many years ago and look where you are today, seems like a crazy, but congratulations. Maybe you can tell us a little bit more about how is your fund with the Jumpstart Nova.
Yeah.
How is it different from the Jumpstart Health Investors?
Yeah.
And is there like a certain focus in the Jumpstart Nova? Why do you start the Jumpstart Nova?
Yeah, absolutely. So the very first fund that we started is called Jumpstart Foundry. It's the earliest stage fund we have. It's the most active one we have, and it invests only in pre-seed stage companies. So it doesn't do any follow-on investing. So we've been doing that since 2014. And that was going really well. Then we eventually layered on our second fund family called Jumpstart Capital. That was investing in seed and Series A and picking up the best companies out of Jumpstart Foundry to follow on invest in. And we were pretty happy with those 2 fund families. But then, COVID hit and, America was sort of, the world was turned, upside down. But in America, we sort of had 2 reckonings. One, we had the reckoning of the healthcare system, right, which was sort of definitely falling over in a variety of ways. It started with PPE, and then it went into, just sort of inadequate support systems for our clinical frontline workers, right? And that just sort of went on for 2 full years. And then also the other big headline we had in America was the murder of George Floyd, which was not the only terrible incident that had happened that year, but it was really just the tipping point, right? We had before that Ahmaud Arbery, and before that Breonna Taylor. So we were building to this conversation, and then George Floyd was at the absolute tipping point to that. And so I, like everybody else in America, was just reflecting on life. We're all in our homes, and it feels like the world is on fire, right? And I was reflecting on my life. I'm a Black male. I'm a venture capitalist, so that already puts me in pretty rare air. I'm a healthcare venture capitalist, so that's like really, really rare air. In Nashville, I'm the only Black healthcare venture capital partner. And then I guess the other thing was that I had invested in multiple Black founders and knew, while it wasn't something we were doing intentionally through any type of quote or anything, it was just more we had networks and, could relate to the founders. And we had 4 exits in 2020, and 2 of those exits were companies that had Black founders. And so, we knew it was also a great group of companies to invest in. And so I was really just thinking about what might my unique impact be in a moment like this. And long story short, ended up writing a letter to Nashville's healthcare industry, which is a very, very, very powerful healthcare industry segment, to which I belong. I'm a member of the Nashville Healthcare Council. I'm a graduate of the Nashville Healthcare Fellows program. And so, I'm part of this industry. And I wrote an open letter to my colleagues, really just sort of highlighting the incredible amount of power that we have, as well as, the inequities that have existed in this industry since its founding, right? It's like, Nashville's the home of most of the largest for-profit health systems in the country. And that really started with HCA Healthcare, which was founded in 1968 by great entrepreneurs, Thomas Frist Sr., Thomas Frist Jr., and Jack Massey. But also in 1968, 3 hours from Nashville in Memphis, where HCA was founded, Dr. Martin Luther King was assassinated. And so, if you just sort of take those 2 events in history and you put them up against each other, it's fairly clear, no Black people could have founded HCA Healthcare. That just was not even possible at that time, right? And then if you just play things out 50 years later and you look at the makeup of boards and executive management teams and so forth and so on, Black people are largely absent from those things across the entire healthcare industry. And so I just made the point that, while we're having this big conversation about health equity and about, the disparities and outcomes from, Black people getting COVID-19 versus white people getting COVID-19, et cetera, let's not forget that there's a fundamental power differential in this industry that is directly correlated with these disparities and outcomes. And so I wrote this letter. The response was very, very positive. And it started a conversation that led to me thinking, based on my position, based on my network, and based on the success we had already had in our portfolio, that we could create a dedicated fund for Black healthcare entrepreneurs. And that had never happened in the history of the venture capital industry. It proved to be pretty needed. And so Jumpstart Nova is exclusively investing in Black founded and led healthcare companies that are based in the US, focused on the US. And we successfully closed our Fund 1, closing $55 million in capital, and have started to deploy that. We've got 6 portfolio companies so far and continuing to grow that portfolio. And we also have a great group of strategic limited partners, which are healthcare organizations from across the country in health systems, payers, trade organizations, medical schools, health services companies that are investors in our fund, and also leaned in to really help us strategically to make the right investments. And then once we make those investments, to help those companies be really successful. So that's Jumpstart Nova. It's our third fund family. And we really think we have an opportunity to add more specific fund families that target, just because healthcare is so large, $3 trillion in spend every year, growing, from 18% probably to 20% GDP in the next 5 years. There's so many aspects and facets of healthcare that, to say you're a healthcare fund doesn't really mean anything. Well, okay, so what does that mean? Are you focused on commercial payers or Medicaid? Are you focused on devices or health tech? Are you focused on brick and mortar or virtual? There's so many different things you could be working on in healthcare. So we think there's room for us to create more, specifically focused healthcare venture capital funds in time. But Nova is I would say our first of that type.
This podcast is sponsored by Brown Rudnick's Global Life Sciences Group, a team of legal professionals that help life science companies, lenders, and investors around the world turn good science into good business. Learn more at brownrudnick.com. This podcast is also sponsored by Canon Quality Group. Canon Quality Group has been helping medtech startups set up quality management systems for over 10 years. If you're unsure when to get started with quality management in your startup, turn to the experts at canonqualitygroup.com.
So share with me, why is it important for, in your fund to specifically focus only to support Black founder? How is that going to make an impact that you hope to achieve?
Yeah, so I think there are a couple of things. One, there is such a strong sense amongst Black founders that they often are not selected for investment by venture capital funds because of their race. That is a very strongly held belief. And when you look at the numbers, it's pretty difficult to say that belief does not have merit. Okay. So one of the things I wanted to do was I wanted to eradicate that situation. So when a Black founder pitches to us, if we say no, one thing they know for sure is it's not because of their race, right? If we say no, it will be because of some other reason. That reason could be that we don't have conviction about the company. That reason could be that when we look at our strategic limited partners, we don't believe that we are the best partner for them. It could be they're too early. It could be they're too late. It could be a million things. But one of those things will not be because they're Black. that will not be a reason why they did not receive investment from us. So that was, I think, the first thing is we wanted to create a fund where Black founders specifically could come and pitch and know that they would be judged on their merit, not on their race. That was the first thing. The second thing was we wanted to dedicate a pool of capital to Black founders to ensure we were making a dent in the disparities related to capital allocation, right? So, 55 million is not that much money, but it's 55 million more that we absolutely know is going to Black founders in healthcare than we had before, right? And so that's sort of the next thing. And then I would say beyond that, there's all of the softer aspects of it where, these founders may feel that we as fund managers might be partners they can better relate to. For a variety of reasons, right? It could just be cultural resonance. It could be that they're trying to solve a problem that is specific to Black populations. And so because we share that lived experience, we will have a better understanding of the problem they're trying to solve and the angle that they're taking in how they're trying to solve that problem, right? So there are all these kind of softer aspects of it as well that I think are beneficial to the companies that we're trying to serve.
As you know, being an investor, like you said, $55 million is a lot, but it's also limited.
That's right.
Then you cannot. What are the things that, as an investor at large, can participate in order to support the mission, the cost that you guys are interested in?
Yeah. So, I mean, we're already seeing, we're already starting to develop great relationships with other venture funds as co-investors, which is great. I think that, generally speaking, the focus on investing in diverse founders, not just Black founders, but diverse founders, whether it be women, whether it be people of color, whether it be people who've served in the military, whether it be people who live with disabilities, has improved quite a bit over the last year and a half. You're talking about an industry that's at least half a century old, and so it's not going to change immediately in a year. But there's certainly more diverse funds out there now. There's more diverse fund managers. They have different focuses, different value sets, and that all reflects into how the capital is deployed and who it gets deployed to. And so we are making progress as an industry, but there's a lot more work to be done. And so, our job is to continue to grow our presence, to make great investments, and also to do, I think, critical industry market research that nobody else really can do. To help make the case that this is a pretty significant market opportunity that is worthy of more capital than is currently going into it. So, I think it's a process. And look, I mean, the reality is we're now a full 2 years beyond the murder of George Floyd, and other headlines have taken over America, right? Whether it be Roe versus Wade, or whether it be, mass shootings, or whether it be inflation and gas prices, or the stock market, collapsing, or the potential looming recession. So, different storylines have different times, and we're excited to be here for the long haul to really address this issue. And, we're always open to and looking for partners who share that vision and that conviction, and may not dedicate an entire fund to it, but certainly are looking to allocate a significant portion of their assets under management into diverse founders.
Yeah, and I think it's a headline. I feel like there's a lot of challenges in life. Even before the internet, I think it's always the latest news always caught everybody's eyes, and it's always good to have somebody who's just laser focused on certain mission. I think that's what make a difference. I think, in terms of the gender, the bias, the race bias, like what you're saying, as the founders of Black founders, what can be done differently for investors who want to increase the diversity? And for them, what are the things? Is there a framework or a tool that they can maybe overcome?
Well, I would say one of the first things to do is to state that you're looking for these founders, right? So, we launched publicly in January of this year, 2022, and when we launched, we had 150 companies fill out our form to be considered for investment. And it's because we were clear in the market, hey, we are looking to invest in Black healthcare founders, right? And so I think the first step is just say it. Just say, hey, we're looking to do a better job of investing in Black healthcare founders. If you are one or one and you meet this criteria, please get in touch with us, right? I mean, open the door, make it, make people feel that you're actually looking to have a conversation with them to learn about what it is they're doing and would actually properly consider them for investment, right? Because the historical data tells us that that for decades venture funds have not been open to investing in diverse founders, right? And so I think simply starting with just publicly saying it, that's a really good start. I don't want to go so far as to establish how people need to design their funds, right? To say, okay, you're going to have this kind of quota, or you're going to favor people in the process this way, that way, or the third. That I don't think that's necessary. I think you can do that if you want to, but that's not necessary. But I do think what's necessary is it's not enough to just think it in your head. If you want to actually evaluate, Black founded companies, let's say, go out on Twitter and go to your website and get on podcasts and say that, right? So the word can get around so that these founders know, oh, hey, this is a fund that's actually looking to potentially invest in me. Let me reach out to them and let me connect with them.
I think sometimes as a founder, one of the things they always being told is like, look at the investor and see who are on their portfolio, whether you're the right fit or not. And then sometimes when they don't see who that they're represented, maybe that's when they feel like this is not the right fit for me.
Of course. And unfortunately, you will see way more websites, portfolio pages where you're not a fit than where you are a fit if you're a Black founder. And if you're a Black healthcare founder, it's really bad. Right. So that's just the reality. And that's why I'm saying coming out and making those statements is very important.
Right. Because I think then at least when they go to the website, they can see, even though currently I'm not fully represented, the fact that it was stated, then it's like, oh, this could be a right fit.
That's right.
For me. Now that was interesting. I mean, I never thought about it that way until you mentioned it. So I know we are short on time. I want to touch on some of your fun music experience, even though you started your career in music, you're not in music, but now you're pretty active in the board of the country music in Nashville. And you shared a bit about your experience being the hip hop artist and then wait a table and then become entrepreneur and then a venture capitalist. What are the things that you learned through that time when you're struggling artist and then try to feed your family and then completely path your career to where you are?
Yeah.
And how does that reflect to entrepreneurs, that what they can learn from that?
Sure. Yeah. I think there's a couple of things, right? And they're actually kind of conflicting ideas that you have to kind of hold in your head at the same time. So one is that you have to understand the market, right, that you're trying to enter. So at any given point in time, the market is accepting of certain things and not accepting of other things. And so, if you are looking for success, if you're looking for adoption, if you're looking for people to like your music, you do need to be relevant within that time, that era, that sound that's going on. That is important because people are creatures of habit, and they're used to what they're used to and they like what they like. And if it doesn't fit into those things, it's going to be pretty difficult for them to take the time out of their life to try to meet you where you are, right? It's like they have a million other things they care about. They want music to do a certain job for them, to take their mind off of work when they're in the car home, or to pump them up when they're at the gym, right? They're using it for a specific purpose, not to like feed your ego. So you need to have a strong understanding of where the market is at any given point in time. Now, having said that, you also need to be very authentic, right? And so you can't be a me too of another artist, right? You can't come across just like some other artists, because people will say, well, I don't need to listen to this person because they are just a copycat, a knockoff of this person, right? So you both have to understand where the market is generally and what the consumer really wants. And at the same time, you have to bring your own totally unique version of that to the market, right? So that when people hear it, it is truly differentiated. That's what makes them want what you have to give, but it still is in the pocket of what the market is looking for. And the market moves and the market evolves over time, and you have to be, malleable. As long as you want to have success in the market, you have to be malleable to continue to evolve with that, and all the while remaining authentic. So that's a difficult balance, I think, for a lot of people to strike in any creative field. I consider startups to be a creative field, right? And so, we see lots of products where what they're doing doesn't feel that radical, but the way that they're doing it is radically unique, and those products can be, massively successful. And so I think that music and musicians and founders are the same in that they're creatives and they're trying to put a creative product out there into the world, and they're trying to get that product to resonate, broadly, and they're trying to get adoption of that product. For musicians, it's a song. For founders, it's a product. But same process ultimately, and same path to success ultimately. And in both cases, listen, it's a lot of hard work. I mean, you see musicians, they're on TV, they're on videos, it looks really good. But like, if you've ever looked at a musician's touring schedule, it is brutal. You couldn't do it. It's like, it's awful. They're literally in like 10 different cities in 10 days. I just did a week of travel and I was in 4 cities, and and I had the benefit of like flying, not being in like a van, driving on the road. Okay. And I was like dead at the end. So it's like, be careful what you wish for. You want to be famous. You want all this influence. It's like, listen, these people work terribly long hours. It's brutally hard. The amount of time they have to put into practice to be good on stage and good in the studio, it's really, really, really hard work. Just like founding a company is really, really, really hard work.
Yeah, I think that's the moral of the story. In order for you to get to where success is not something that you don't need to put on the time and effort and energy to it.
That's right.
I think that's, and then I think also you mentioned a lot about being authentic and how to be authentic, because I think oftentimes people trying to please others.
Yes.
And then not be authentic. And how do you stay true to that yourself?
Well, you have to understand that is not, that is both not sustainable and not optimal. You can do it and you can get results. It's very difficult to sustain. And it's not because it's expensive energetically, and it's also just not optimal, right? It's much more optimal to be who you are, so you don't have to like remember who you have to be in any given setting. It's just so much easier to show up and be who you actually are. That's like a million times easier, right? Now, the difficult process sometimes is people don't know who they are yet. Right. And that's a maturing process and an introspection process and a life experience process and a maturation process. But like, once you do know who you are, be you. Don't be anyone else. When you're young, when you're a kid, you're not you, because you don't know who you are yet. Right. You're a teenager. Even when you're a young adult, you don't know who you are yet. Generally speaking, you're emulating what you're emulating what looks cool or what feels cool or what you believe success to be. But over time, through lived experiences, if you're taking cues from your body, and from your heart, you should be navigating towards who you actually are, doing the things that make you feel good, and also when you do them, provide value to the world, right? The way you dress, the way you speak, the way you engage people, the work that you choose to do, what time of day you choose to work, right? All of these kinds of things, they're all edges to who you are. And you have to get to the point where you understand those things, and then you can stand up for them. You have to defend those things. You have to defend the things that make you with other people. And that's everybody from like your coworkers to your customers to your spouse and your family. When it comes to defending who you are, there's really nobody who you're not going to at some point in time have to establish a boundary with, right? That's just, it's you and you alone on that front. But that has to be, that has to be a big part of your equation for success. And I think that's true for everybody. There's not a lot of things that I believe to be universally true. That one I believe is universally true.
Yeah, no, I like how you were saying about when you're young, you figure out who you want, who is your true that you really want to be. And it comes with maturation, and hopefully at some point, this is me, I like me, and then you'll be okay to be true to yourself, and everything will build around it, I think.
Yeah, that's right. And it's super interesting, right? Because all of these things that really, really work in life, they're like these opposed ideas, right? And so it's like, it's not caring what other people think, and also paying attention to what is resonating with other people, right? Because we don't live in isolation. We are social animals, right? So the feedback from other people does matter. It does matter, right? And it has a lot to do with how we feel. But there's a difference between understanding that as a general compass for the work that you're going to do and how you're going to do it in your life versus trying to please a particular person, right? So those are things that you only really figure out with life experience. I think these are very, very difficult things when you're young, to parse out the difference between those two things.
Yeah, no, I remember, I felt like when I was younger, I felt like I do certain things, and then I changed completely just based on somebody quick reaction. I was like, oh, but then I think now you become more like, I think I'm good.
I think I'm good. Yeah. I appreciate that feedback.
Yeah. But certain things like, oh yeah, I can tweak, but I think the core are pretty much, you kind of figure out your core.
That's right.
Which is make you happier, I think, in terms of how you live your life. But thank you. This has been great. Thank you so much for sharing. I feel like I have so much more questions because you have so much more fun activities that you're doing. And I know that you're, founder of an owner of Nashville Soccer Club. And I thought that's really exciting too, in terms of your venture and your music. You have so much energy.
Well, thank you. Yeah. I mean, we could always circle back at another time, but I appreciate this conversation. It was fun. I always like to, talk about, how to live. Right. Because it's something I'm constantly working on too. Right. Like I don't have it all figured out, but I think, the more that we have conversations about it, reflect on the things we have figured out. Sometimes it exposes things that we haven't figured out. And, it's always much more valuable for me than just running down a resume of things that I've accomplished. Right. I mean, that's not that fun.
Yeah, no, that's great. Well, thank you so much. Thanks for your time. And we'll catch up some other time soon, I hope.
Yeah, that sounds great. Thank you so much.
Thank you for listening to another episode of the Health Technology Podcast. We want to thank our executive producer, Herminio Neto, and our podcast engineer, Andrew Rojek. If you enjoyed this podcast, be sure to subscribe and leave a review. The Health Technology Podcast is available on all major platforms.